We're at Darlington Camera Club in Darlington in the UK, and this is a tutorial on Lightroom, particularly on the development module in Lightroom, and it's applicable to taking an image and preparing it for a digital competition. Our desired output resolution is 1440 by 1024. That's pretty standard for Camera Club style competitions now, and this is what this tutorial is going to be about. So just to give a quick overview of what Lightroom is all about before we jump into the develop module, Lightroom actually has a suite of what are called modules, and those modules are these things at the top of the screen. So library, develop, mapping, book, slideshow, print and web. And library is all about getting your pictures into Lightroom, catalogued, keyworded and stored and archived so that you can find things now and in the future. Once you've actually got the pictures into Lightroom, and that's a subject of a tutorial for another time, when we've got things into Lightroom, we then go into the main body of things, which is developing. And a bit like the darkroom, we develop pictures. So the kind of stuff that we do in the digital darkroom or the digital Lightroom, hence the reason the name of the product to be Lightroom, is that we bring the images onto the table, we examine the images, we look to see the ones that we actually want to take further forward, so we might make some selection. We then would spend some time optimizing the image for exposure, for color, for contrast, for dodging and burning, for maybe some cleanup of little specks on the images in terms of inclusions. That might be dust from a sensor, or a bird that's flying across a sky that you just want to zap. All of that kind of stuff is done in the develop module in Lightroom, exactly the same as it would have been done in the darkroom. After you've developed an image, exactly the same as you would have done in the old days in a darkroom, you then have to do something with the image. In the case of the darkroom, it would be a case of drying a print and then mounting it in some way for presentation. And we do exactly the same kind of thing in Lightroom, except we go from the development module here either to one of four different places, to a book where you can put together a bunch of images into a photo book, and you can order that online, and you can actually create a book, or into a slideshow that you might use in some other multimedia or some other application, maybe for the web. For print, which is obviously quite important because we're about making prints, and if photographers never print their work out, never hang it on the wall, you never improve your art. But equally important these days is the web, and so that can be output in web slideshows and that kind of stuff. So we'll have a look at some of those things in a different tutorial. Today we're going to examine only stuff to do with the develop module, and going from the development module onto an online system, and in this case Flickr. And Flickr is what Darlington Camera Club are using in order to collect members' work, in order for it to be selected and judged for entry into competitions. So let's jump into the development module and let's see what's actually in there. So I have a bunch of images here on my light box, just as though I'd been in the darkroom. Instead of these being negatives, these are positives. These are positive images. So you can assume these are a bit like slides. They're sitting on a light table, and I can go through my images and I can view them. There are some commands within Lightroom which most people don't know. If you use the L key, which stands for lights out, you press it once, you get a faded background. Press it again, and you're actually looking at the image as though it was on a light table. That's rather fabulous, isn't it? So if we go back to the first image there, we hit the L key, we're actually looking at the images, and now we can step through the images that are in the light box just using the arrow keys. As you can see, as we step through, we're looking at a kind of slideshow, but we've got it under control. Hit the L key again, lights come back on. So the development module starts by you making a selection of the image that you might want to do some work on. So in this case, it might be that I'm interested in this first image, I'm interested in this fourth image, and if I hold the command key down or the control key on a PC, hold that down and click, I selected two. And then I can go along and I can select another one. So let's select that one. Okay, all of that is useful for us to make selections. If I now dip back very quickly into the library module, I have the ability at the bottom of the light table now to either look at the images in grid view, single view, an XY view that allows me to look at before and after, or selection 1 against selection 2, or more importantly, the ones that I selected to lay them out on a table so that you're only interested in the images that you've selected. And each of one of those that you can go over, you can hover over it, you can double click on it, it comes back up into the light table in full view. Hit the L key, lights out again. Really useful when you're working on a monitor to be able to get rid of the clutter and just look at the image. Go back again to the selection. Okay, so the one that I think I want to work on is possibly this one, the third one down. I don't want either of these two, and I can click on the X and it removes it from my selection. And if you look now in the bottom, it's deselected the other images. So that's the image we want to work on. We'll now dip back into the develop module. So we've made a selection. We've got a bunch of images there. We've looked at combinations of them. I've made a decision, may not be the decision you would make, it's the decision I've made for the purpose of this tutorial, and we're going to work on this image. Now, in the develop module, the desktop, if you like, is really split into three. The left-hand side is the viewer pane, and as with all good things in Lightroom, you can turn it off if your real estate on screen needs to have it turned off. So you can turn it off and that panel disappears completely. You get a bigger picture. I like to leave it on because this image on the top left hand side here is going to give you a view of everything you're going to do to your image. It's, if you like, your window to the changes you're going to make. The things that are below that in the list are the presets, and presets in Lightroom allow you to be able to apply a series of correction steps that you may have preset, that you can go through, and you can actually create a preset of maybe every image that you bring in, maybe you do something with the contrast curve, maybe you apply some clarity to it, maybe you increase the vibrancy of the image, maybe you actually apply a noise filter, and that happens on every single image you bring in, and that's your standard. Well, you could actually set that as a preset, and when in Lightroom, when you bring a picture into the system, you could apply that preset before you even start editing. So if you do the same thing time and time and time again to every single one of your images, the best way for you to do that and save yourself time is to collect those steps and apply it as a preset, and then you can apply that to any new images. We'll do that again another time. We're going to get down and dirty and actually do it for real on this. So we'll just go through. So they're the presets. So if you look at the top left box, this one here, as I go through my presets, you can see that that image at the top is changing. Can you see that? And as it's changing, that's showing me the effects that I could be applying, the presets that I have set up or that I have collected. And as we go further down, there's even more of them. I happen to have quite a lot of presets in my Lightroom setup. You may have more, you may have less. It's completely up to you. At the very bottom of the left-hand side, bottom of the panel, is a thing called snapshots. As you start to edit in Lightroom, you can create a snapshot of everything you've done up till now. And then that's a way for you to collect a certain amount of the steps and to apply it to another image. Or you can just create like in Photoshop that you can create layers and you can turn layers off to do different things. Snapshots are effectively a way of you collecting steps in a stack. The history at the moment contains absolutely nothing because we've done nothing to the image. As we start to do things to the image, so let's just adjust the temperature. Now, in my history panel, what we've done to that image just there is now in the history. And we can undo that, Command Z. Lightroom is a completely non-destructive editing environment. It means that it never edits or alters the original image. All you're doing is applying corrections into a database and they're collected in a stack which you see in the history. At any time you can go back to the beginning. At any time you can go back to a different layer in the stack and carry on from where you left off. At any time. It's non-destructive. So that's the difference between Lightroom and Photoshop. This is a Photoshop product. Lightroom is a Photoshop product. It's called Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. And it's meant for photographers. It's meant to do the stuff that every photographer has done from day one of photography being invented, which is taking an image, maximizing the image, and presenting the image for onward use. Okay, that's what Lightroom's about. Photoshop is still a fantastic tool, and all of the raw corrections and all the corrections that you can do in Lightroom, you can do in Photoshop. But it will take you 100 times longer because you are working step by step, and once you apply those corrections, unless you've got thousands of layers in your Photoshop file, you can't go backwards. The images tend to always be a lot bigger in Photoshop. Photoshop is a fantastic tool. I use it a lot, but I use it for creative work, for creating artwork for other use. For photography, it's Lightroom, and that's all I use. Okay, so that's what the left panel is about. The center panel, well, we've seen what that does. That's just our editing space. On the right-hand panel, this is really the interesting one. At the very top of the panel there is the histogram, and the histogram is all about telling you how your image is exposed, the range of tones, the color balance, and if you know how to use it, and if you don't know how to use it, you need to learn how to use it, because that is the correct tool for you to know what is going to happen to your finished image when it is sent off either to print or to a web service or somewhere else. Yeah, because the screen lies. Why do I say that? The screen lies because maybe it's not calibrated. The histogram is always showing you what really is contained within your image. If you don't have a properly calibrated screen, you can't possibly know what that image looks like. The histogram will give you some chance of knowing. Okay, so the histogram, make it your friend because it is the most important tool that we have in digital photography. Also around the histogram, you can see that we've got certain data relating to the image. So what it's telling me is that this was a picture taken at ISO 200. That's the sensitivity of the sensor. It was taken on a 25mm focal length lens at f6.3 at 1/400th of a second. Okay, so it's giving me information. The next thing down is my tool palette. And in my tool palette I have the ability to crop images, I have the ability to correct images in terms of spot removal and cloning, I have a red eye correction tool, and if like me occasionally you manage to get pictures with red eye, Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, you can cure it completely. It's fantastic. Then you have a graduated filter that allows you, just like in your photography when using your Lee filters or your Cokin filters or whatever, you can apply graduated filters. But not just graduated filters that allow you to apply maybe a neutral density filter. You can do that in here as well, so you can create a gradation in terms of exposure, but you can also create gradations with relation to color and softness and color temperature. and sharpness. All of those things are possible with a graduated filter here, and we'll look at those. The next one across is new to Lightroom 5, which is a radial filter. So instead of it being a linear graduated top to bottom, side to side, squarish filter, this is a circular filter. And that might allow you to be able to actually correct, flare from the sun where you've got a particular hot spot. Things that would be very difficult to correct with a linear filter, you can do with a radial filter. And the last one is the brush tool. And the brush tool in this case allows you to apply anything that Lightroom can do in the form of a brush that you can actually paint on your picture. So how you would have done your dodging and burning in the darkroom is done with a brush in Lightroom. And we'll have a look at that. So further down on the right hand side here we have what's called the basic settings. And the basic settings are the ability to adjust color temperature, exposure, contrast, adjusting highlights, shadows, the white level, the black level, and then we get into some really interesting filters, the ability to adjust the clarity. I just want you to look and see what happens on this image when I adjust the clarity. If I pull the clarity up, it's like it snaps into focus. If I take it the other way, we get soft focus. The vibrancy is just pulling the edge saturation a little bit. Take it out, we can take the vibrancy out, but there's still some colour in there, or we can make it look really ridiculous. It's not like the saturation control, which allows you to take colour away completely, or make it look like something from Mars. Okay, so we'll look at those. Then the photographer's friend, which is the tone curve. How do you get non-linear contrast into an image? The idea of applying, like you would have done in the darkroom, flashing of paper so that you actually control the whites or you control the blacks in an image is done through the contrast curve, and we can look at that. And then the ability, the advanced stuff, which we're not going to look at tonight, which is about recoloring, changing individual color balance of colors, both in HSL, which is hue, saturation and luminance, or the color, or a toned image where you actually apply the black and white or the color within an image to change the tone of the black and white image as it's finished. You can self-tone, you can create tritones, duotones, you can apply sharpening, noise reduction. I regularly take images at ISO 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, and with a little tweak of the noise reduction I get images that can be used billboard size. All right, happens to be through some pretty good cameras that have got very good sensors for low light photography, but a little bit of noise correction in Lightroom, job fixed. And then there is the lens correction tool, that if you've got images where the lenses have been calibrated and are stored within Lightroom, and that's a manufacturer's thing really, you can do it yourself, but it's quite a long drawn out job. But if you've got, so if you're a Canon user or a Nikon user or a Sony user, you're laughing because your lenses will be already stored within the database. And that allows you with one click to apply all the corrections that are applicable to that lens. And then you have some effects, which is about vignetting images, that great effect that we spend all the money on buying better and better and better lenses to get away with all these aberrations, and then we apply vignetting, which puts them all back again in terms of darkening the edge of the image. We can even apply some grain to an image to punch it up in black and white. We can apply golf ball size grain, or we can create the effect of different film stocks through applying the grain. So that's what all the stuff does in there. Let's see how it actually works on the image, shall we? So this is the bit where I do allow you to actually shout out what you want to do, because you decide what you want to do with the image. So looking at this image on the screen, what do we need to do with it? As photographers, what do we need to do to this image? What's the very first thing that you want to do? Let's just see a show of hands and we'll ask a question.
Straight the verticals?
Straighten the verticals, okay, it's taken with a wide angle lens. We know that because the data here tells us that. So we're going to get converging verticals, and no matter what we do, we can correct it a little bit, but we'll start to distort the image because this is a wide angle image. So we'll have a look at that. That's quite an advanced one. So we'll jump back down to the camera calibration area, which is down here. We'll go into the manual mode, which is where we are. Let's look for vertical distortions, and as we can see, we pull the image, we can do all kinds of clever things with it. So there's a bit of correction. That's now corrected that vertical. Yeah. And we can hit this button here that says constrain the crop so that we don't end up with any white. We've now got a corrected verticals presentation. For me, I don't want to do that because this is deliberately taken to have converging verticals. But you can do that, and you could do the same in terms of that would be pincushion distortion, that would be barrel distortion, and you can correct both of those. And on the horizontal, we could actually flip the image so that we're actually removing some of the issues to do with parallax or non-lined up horizontal images. We could also rotate. Yeah, but there are better ways of doing that, which we'll come to in a moment. So that's how you would correct the verticals in Lightroom. Try and do that in Photoshop with a click. That's really tough to do in Photoshop. Okay, so let's go back up here. Instead, I would go to the crop tool. And in the crop tool, if I actually remove the crop and say reset the crop, you have the ability by just going to the edge, and the crop tool is this one on the left hand side here. You go to the edge here, and if you drag it, you're actually doing your rotation there. So I know that we have a slight issue with verticals here because of the wide angle nature. But I'm going to leave it like that because that I think works for that image. So there we go. The next thing we want to do, who wants to throw the next one in? Paul. Contrast. Contrast. Would you do that to an image next? Would you adjust the contrast next? Or would that be one of the things that you do after you've applied other corrections?
White balance.
White balance? Okay, I might do that. What else might I do before I do that? Yeah, we could do that, making skies bluer.
Things such as lens flare?
Lens flare you can't remove. Lens flare is an optical aberration that you can't remove. It is a function of the lens. It's where light bounces around inside the lens, and it takes a real lot of effort to remove that, and that really is a Photoshop thing because it involves a lot of cloning in order to do that. But spot removal, absolutely. So one of the things that I didn't show you is that when we're in the middle of the screen there, we actually see that we end up with a magnifying glass. And if I click on that, suddenly we've gone from over here, if you look on the viewer pane, from fit, which is where it was, or we could have fill, or 1:1. So that's looking at the image at its maximum resolution. So why don't we see if we can find something to clone out? This is actually quite a clean image. Except that that's a piece of the sky. But let's assume that this weather vane is actually a dust bunny on the lens, yeah, or on the sensor. What we would do is that we would go to this tool here, which is the spot removal tool. We click on it, we come back over into the main viewer area. Using the square brackets on your keyboard, you can make the brush size bigger or smaller. Yeah? And that's exactly the same as you could drag these handles here, and you can feather it so that it becomes a softer or harder. So it's a bit like having a soft brush or a hard brush. So I want to come over here and I want to try and get rid of this weather vane all in one go. And I'm going to click on it. And immediately you see that another circle appeared. Lightroom has tried to work out where in the image the tonal values are roughly the same that it could apply a clone from. And that's done a good job, hasn't it? Yeah? If we move this around, we can see what it's actually done. I wasn't actually properly centered on there. But I could make it bigger. And if I make it bigger, it takes up more of the area like that. Okay? And then I can either tell Lightroom to heal, which what it's going to try to do is going to try to merge that area into the surroundings, or to clone, where it's going to copy from this area. So that's rather a big thing to be doing. If I just hit the escape key and delete, what happens is we get rid of it. Yeah, little puff of smoke, and the correction is removed. So let's now go back out of that tool. Let's see if we can find something else to actually properly clone. Let's look down here at the grass. Let's assume we want to get rid of one of these dandelion things. Click on the clone tool again, hover over it, apply the right size of brush, and you need a brush that's the right, that's going to cover the area, not half the image. Click on it. You can drag it. See how we're actually sampling now? I could change it to clone or to heal. Heal is the best one here. It's gone. You can do that in Photoshop. It's quite easy to do in Photoshop. But in Photoshop, once you actually say apply and you've forgotten to put it on a layer of its own, and you've done other things, you can't go backwards. Well, you can go backwards, but then you have to save an intermediate file. Whereas in Lightroom, as we said before, we scroll all the way down here. We look at our history palette, and you can see all the things that we've done to this image. And as we step backwards through them, look at that. They're all reappearing. See that? As we go back again, yeah. So all the things that we've done are stored in a database, and you can get back to it.
Can you remove an individual item of history?
You can't remove an individual item of history, but what you can do is, for instance, if I wanted to actually say, I need to store this picture up to this point before it goes on to doing the next correction, I could put the highlight that area, and I could create a snapshot at that point, and that becomes an image that you can edit from that point. You can do different things too. Okay, so let's go back to there. So we've removed that. That's all gone. We'll come back out to the full view. What I would probably be looking to do now is to show you how you can use the graduated filter to darken that sky. So I'm going to click on the graduated filter, and the things that we can play with in the graduated filter are color temperature and tint, exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, clarity, saturation, sharpness, noise, moire, defringing, and you can apply color. I just want to put graduated filter on there. If I'd had a graduated filter with me when I took this image, I might have put one on, but I didn't. So I'm going to click from the top of the screen, and I'm going to drag down. And can you see that there are 3 parallel lines there? Those 3 parallel lines you need to keep parallel to the horizon or the shape of the building. You can turn them if you wish, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to now decrease the exposure of that. Wow. Look at that. But what's happened? Because we've applied a graduated filter in exactly the same way that you would have done on the camera, we've darkened the tower of the church. All right? But the sky is now a whole lot better. So we'll keep that. And we'll come back out, and now we'll go to our brush tool. And with our brush tool, I want to increase the exposure of some parts of the tower to overcome the reduction in exposure that's been created through the graduated filter. So I'm just going to say, I think I need to apply, I don't know, about 1/4 of a stop, 1/2 a stop. I'm going to click somewhere, and then what I'm going to do, I'll just go to 1 to 1, drag down so that I can get to the place I want to be. Or I could actually go over here to this square and drag the square over, and that moves the viewport on the screen. That's clever, isn't it? Can't do that in Photoshop either. Yeah. Or I might go to fill at that point so I can see more of it. I'm now going to start to click. I'm going to increase the size of my brush once again with the square brackets, and I'm just going to draw as though I was painting. So if you're using you know, a tablet, this is really easy. And can you see what's happening as I'm doing this? Very subtly, we're lightening that. But it doesn't have to be subtle, because at any point, I can change that correction. I could make it darker. I don't want to do that. I could make it really light. I don't want to do that either. But I might want to do that. Another little trick, if I hover over the button, we get a mask that appears that tells us where the correction has been applied. Or we could show it if we wanted to. Show selected mask overlay. And we could leave that on. And as we drew more, the mask would increase. So sometimes it's useful to be able to draw with the mask on. And we can change the size of the brush there so that I can get that bit. Yeah. And you're going to say to me, what happens when you've drawn over the sky and you didn't mean to do that? Well, I can go and remove the mask from that point, exactly the same as in Photoshop. So I just hold the Alt key down, see the negative appears, yeah, where the brush is. See that? Yeah. And now when I start to draw, yeah, I'm being very coarse with this at the moment, but I'm actually removing the mask from that point. Now I've gone over it a bit too far, so I'm just going to go and draw that back in again a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to turn off the mask, and there is my corrected tower. Drag it down a bit because I probably only need about 1/2 a stop there. That works, doesn't it? All right, so we come out of the... Now what I could have done is that I could have applied other things. I could have done something with the highlights. We'll have a look at those in a minute. I could actually have coloured that. If I click on here and bring up the colour, I could apply colour to it. So if I'm selectively trying to recolour or improve the colour of the shadows, sometimes you might have a really nice image where the correctly exposed part of the image is the correct colour balance, but the shadows are too cold. You could warm the shadows up or cool down the highlights using this tool. So that's actually quite a useful thing to be able to do. So I'm going to leave that like that because I'm going to come in and I'm going to show you something else. Let's go back out to full screen. A tool that we can also use, which is absolutely fabulous, is the highlight control. If I pull on the highlights, can you see what's happening? We're adjusting just the highlights. I probably could have turned off our graduated filter correction and just adjusted things using the highlight control. That probably would have fixed my image. What I'm doing all the time is that I'm keeping an eye on the histogram. And what I can see on my histogram is that I have none of the darks going to complete black, but more importantly, I have no highlights going to complete white. So I actually could afford to increase the exposure a little bit, because nothing is burning out. Right? If I really push the exposure like that, and it's not burnt out, it's still okay. If I now pull the highlights, watch what happens. Is that clever? That's clever. Okay, so there we go. But that image wasn't bad to start with, so I'll just bring that back there. It's quite a nicely exposed image. It was a little bit dark. Okay, so I'm going to go to there. Image is getting better. What else do I want to do? Well, I now want to show you the effect of just applying a little clarity, up to about number 10. More than that, and it starts to posterize. I always apply around about 12 to all of my images, and what you end up getting is just the effect of edge sharpness, and it makes images a bit more punchy. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to apply a tone curve. I now want to adjust the contrast. I could adjust the contrast by using the contrast control, but that's too much, isn't it? That just either washes it out or makes it too claggy. All the highlight, all the detail in the shadows have now disappeared, so I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is that I want to come down to the tone curve. And the tone curve has a number of settings. At the moment, this is a linear curve, meaning that you have a straight transfer from black to white. If I apply a medium contrast curve, do you see how suddenly the contrast punches up? Turn it off again. Watching the image. Yeah, it's like it's all flat now, flat colour, flat contrast. Apply a medium contrast to it, and suddenly the image all punches up. And what's happened here, if you look at the little contrast curve, is that we've applied a bit of an S. Instead of that being a straight line, it's become an S, where the highlights have been boosted slightly and the shadows drop back. And being a photographer, I might want to actually do some more of that. I might want to pull that a little harder. Yeah, okay, I like that. And I might want to push the highlights a little. I kind of like that. So there we are. That's what we call, in digital imaging, our S-curve. And you'll see that on lots of images, just to increase the highlight intensity and blacken the shadows a little bit in order to give you better contrast. Right, what else do I want to do with this image? Well, I might want to bring the vibrancy up a little bit to boost those colours. I'm just going to add just a slight bit of vibrancy. Nothing too drastic, just bring it up a little bit. That's now a lot more punchy, that's great. The last thing I'm going to do to this image is I'm going to dodge and burn bits of the image in order to really bring the image to life. I want to darken the walls of this sandstone coloured church. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a new pin. I'm going to set my exposure to probably about half a stop under. I'm going to set my brush size to be quite a large feather, but not much flow. I don't want it to paint too heavily. And then I'm going to start to darken. And as I start to darken, the effect that you are seeing is that the sandstone bricks look as though suddenly they're coming into focus. Yep, darken that slightly. Darken this slightly. Suddenly, the whole thing is coming into focus. I might want to actually drop another pin now, and I might want to lighten some things, so I could just drop a pin by clicking New, there. I want to now go up 2/3 of a stop, and I want to lighten just a little bit of this roof. And to prove it really is doing it, we'll turn it up a little bit. Just want to lighten little bits of this, just to give it a bit more texture. Okay. I might now want to darken some of these gravestones, so I can go to New again, drop the pin, bring exposure down. Maybe I want to punch the contrast a little bit, and I want to just darken a couple of these stones. Dodging and burning, exactly the same as was done in the digital darkroom. That's far too much on that one, isn't it? It's too dark now. Command Z, undo it. I could go backwards in my history palette at any point and undo things. Okay, so we're nearly there. We're nearly there. The last thing I want to do is, having taken this with a very expensive lens, I now want to darken the edges of the frame. And I can do that either using one of my presets that I've set up, or I can actually go down here to the bottom of this, this right-hand palette, and I can pick up the bit that says lens vignetting. And what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to darken it. And can you see? That's darkening the edges slightly. But what I can also do is I can set the midpoint, so where it starts. And all that's done, that just holds that image together. Just, it's not obvious it's vignetted, it's just focusing you. Yeah. In order to prove that, if I turn the effect off, I can do that with that little toggle switch there. Can you see? It's amazing. That really works for that image. So, the steps that we've gone through is we've straightened the image. The first thing that you should do is straighten the image. We've applied a graduated filter. We've adjusted the exposure. We've adjusted our curves. We've done our dodging and burning. I might want to apply now, finally, a colour correction. To find a grey point on here is going to be kind of interesting. Maybe it's in there somewhere. That's a bit blue, don't like that. But Lightroom actually has the ability to apply an auto white balance correction, which it has done there. I personally don't like that. I thought it was better straight out the camera. It's a little bit cool, but it is somewhat sunny, but over warming the image with the sandstone of the church makes it look unnatural. So I'm happy with the colour balance on that. So what do we do now? We now need to get it onto the Darlington Camera Club Flickr page. And obviously what we're not going to do, because this tutorial is going out to the world afterwards, is we're not going to divulge the settings for doing that, but we'll have a look at, the passwords and log on, but we will have a look at the settings we need to use. In order to export that picture, I need to be in the library module. Okay? Don't need to do anything with it. We don't have to save it or anything like that. We're just going to the library module. I'm going to go down to our Flickr preset. I'm going to look at the settings of our Flickr preset. Our Flickr preset maintains the existing file name. You can change it. It creates a JPEG image at quality 60, good enough for Flickr. But importantly, we have set the parameters for the height and width. And the height and width that you need to set are 1440 pixels wide by 1024 pixels high. And the image will then be scaled to the maximum one of those. So if it's a portrait image, it will be 1024 high. If it's a landscape image, it will be 1440 wide, and the other dimension will be scaled so that the aspect ratio remains the same. We're going to sharpen it for the screen, so Lightroom will apply just a little bit of sharpening. And as we remember from previous times, we apply a little watermark. Even on Flickr, people will nick your pictures, so just watermark them. That's what we do. So I'll just cancel that because we don't need to do anything with that. The important thing for you guys is that you need to create, by right-clicking, a photo set with your name. And then the image gets put into the photo set with your name. because when it's uploaded to Flickr, it's that photo set that will have your name that will contain your pictures. Okay? So I could just literally drag that image now over to my photo set. Okay? And all those settings that are set there will be applied. So I just click on that and I look at the grid view. A new photograph to publish is that one, the one we've just edited. If I now right click on that and say, if I right click on that one and say publish now, Lightroom will do its magic, it will upload it to Flickr and it's all there. So that's the first thing. But what about if I want to find that picture back in the library again? Because now it's in the Flickr set. I can right click on it and I can say go to folder in library. And what it does is it finds it in the library for me. That's the whole advantage of Lightroom. You can't do any of this stuff with Photoshop. You have to remember where you've put things. What about if I want to create a JPEG image or a PNG image or a Photoshop image or something else of that picture that I can send to a printer? What I would do is I would use the function in Lightroom which is the export function. I just right click on the image, I click on export. I have a bunch of presets that I use, but you can just go to export, click the export button, and you can set it up. So where do you want to put it? Same folder as the original image. Yes, I like to do that, but I always put it in a subfolder, and I always call the subfolder develops. Yeah, so that I know that the finished images sit with the originals but in a develop folder. Just a piece of thing that I do. It's a good practice thing to do. Do I want to add it to the catalogue so that the exported image is in Lightroom as well? You could, but I don't. I keep the original copies only in Lightroom. The exported ones are just sitting out there on the computer. I could rename it. So in this case I might want to actually give it a custom name. And that custom name might be dodgy image for a DCC meeting. Okay, that's what I'm going to call that image. It's not video, so that setting's not alive. And now you have the ability to set the image format. So does it want to be a JPEG, a Photoshop file, a TIFF file, a DNG file, or in its original format? It's never the original format. JPEG is probably what we need to send off. So I'll set it to JPEG. What colour space? Oh, now. Colour spaces are an interesting one for another night. For the purpose of the web and for low resolution prints, sRGB is fine. Just leave it like that. You can limit the file size if you want to. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set it at its maximum resolution because I want to send it to a printer. Okay. I'm going to set its sizes, and I could set any size I want, or I could just unclick the resize to fit, and the maximum size image that can be created will be created. Okay, but I'll leave it at 1440 by 1024. I want to sharpen for the screen again. Do I want to remove the location information? If I had a GPS thing on my camera, some of you may have, it'll have location information. I don't want to remove it, I want to keep all of the data with it. I don't want to apply a watermark this time because actually I don't want the image to be corrupted in any way. And then the last thing I want to do is when it's finished exporting, I want it to show me where it's put it so I can find it. So you just leave show in Finder there. Okay. I now click export, and the original image remains unchanged, but a new output image with dodgy image for DCC meeting as its file name in the develop folder underneath the original image location has been created. It is a 1.7 megabyte JPEG image, and if I just click on it on my Mac to preview, there is my finished image. Yeah, so that's the manual way or the automatic way that we just looked at. And just to prove that it's there, we'll just go back to our photo set on Darlington Camera Club's website. I'll just look under my one, and there in all its glory is the image that we've just spent the last 3/4 of an hour fiddling with. Okay, so it works. Lightroom is a fantastic tool. We've scratched the surface. We've gone about 5% of what this is capable of doing. So that, I think, is probably the point where we stop for now. That's the end of that bit of the tutorial. It's time for a cup of tea, and then we'll take questions afterwards.